On today's show, the Hawks have some award finalists in the names of Dyson Daniels and Zaccharie Risacher, plus a snub for Trey Young, and we'll get into all of what was said at exit interviews over the weekend for Atlanta. We'll get into all that and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1957 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Sunday evening into Monday here in late April. And today's podcast is brought to you by the folks at FanDuel Sportsbook. And right now, if you're a new customer, get $250 in bonus bets when your first $1 bet wins at FanDuel. And the place to go is FanDuel.com to get started. I also want to encourage you at the top of the show, as I always do, to make sure first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks. Check us out and subscribe to the show anywhere you find your podcast. That includes YouTube. If you're watching this podcast on video right now, please like this video as you're watching it. And then also check us out on audio platforms like Apple, Spotify, Overcast, etc. And we'll dive in now to an interesting show, the first show of the offseason, quote unquote, for the Hawks. If you missed it, I did a deep dive into the Hawks being eliminated on Friday night at the hands of the Miami Heat in overtime. A 40-minute, basically, retrospective on that game, on the season, my deep dive thoughts, my more broad thoughts, all that's there for you. And it's been about 48 hours since the Hawks were eliminated from the playoffs. In between, Atlanta had exit interviews on Saturday morning and afternoon at the practice facility in Brookhaven. We'll get into that later on in the podcast. But first, some news that came out in the last couple of minutes, actually, so I'm recording this podcast Sunday evening. And then also a brief look ahead to what's going to happen on Monday. But the first thing, and again, kind of newsy, is that the award finalists were named by the NBA on Sunday. If you missed this, this is actually just changed the last few years. The league, instead of just announcing the award winners later on, they announced the finalists kind of in stages, and all the finalists were announced in general. It's the top three in every category. And the Hawks are actually, for a team that won 40 games, very well represented, I would say, on all of these lists. There also was a snub that we'll get into in a second. But first things first, the positive stuff. Dyson Daniels is a finalist for both Most Improved Player and Defensive Player of the Year. Not a huge surprise on either one, but certainly notable. I believe he is the only player that is multiple nominated, other than Clutch Player of the Year is kind of an overlapping award. But Dyson, certainly a rare company here, being nominated twice. I won't go through the whole detail here. It's been talked about a lot all season long about his Defensive Player of the Year case, Most Improved Player case. But as a reminder, Dyson became the first player in the NBA to average 3 steals per game since 1991, well before he was born. Also the most total steals in a season for any player since 1996, before he was born, and set the modern record for deflections in a season while grading out as one of the best one-on-one defenders in the league and taking out one of the toughest assignments of the league, night in, night out, being the primary guy for Atlanta. So it obviously a pretty impressive Defensive Player of the Year case. Obviously, there is a bias, and probably an earned bias to some degree, towards bigs in that award, which is why it's a little bit more interesting of a case than it might seem to be on the outside looking in. But Dyson is in the top 3, along with Evan Mobley and Draymond Green in some order in Defensive Player of the Year. And the Most Improved Player, pretty obvious case there too. He's been one of the favorites for the last couple of weeks. Ended up averaging 14 points, 6 rebounds, and 4.5 assists per game. Quietly one of the 5 to 10 best rebounding guards in the whole league, which is not a small thing when you add to all the resume that he already has with the scoring, with the assist support. Obviously, he's not an elite offensive player by any means of the imagination, but Dyson has made major, major gains on offense to the point where he was a legitimate positive at times this year for the Hawks on offense to go along with the very clearly elite defense. So heck of a profile there. If I had to guess right now, he has a better chance to win Most Improved than Defensive Player of the Year. I'm not saying that's correct before anybody yells at me, but if you look at the betting market, some of the voters have released their ballots. I think it will be a surprise to me if he wins Defensive Player of the Year. It will not surprise me if he wins Most Improved Player, if that makes sense. So we'll see. That will be announced for a few weeks here, but at the very least, a very impressive double for Dyson Daniels to be in the top 3 in both Most Improved and Defensive Player of the Year. The other one that was not a surprise, but also was notable, is that Zaccharie Risacher is a finalist for Rookie of the Year alongside Stephon Castle of the Spurs and Jalen Wells of the Grizzlies. Risacher finished in the top 3 in scoring and in both total points and points per game, also top 5 in minutes, and was one of the rare guys that was a rookie this year, played big minutes on a real team that was trying to win. Obviously, Wells had that too, So, but Wells is also 4 years older and all those things. Anyway, Risacher, same thing. I don't know if he's going to win. In fact, the betting market until the betting odds closed pointed to Castle as a pretty big favorite. I shared multiple times that I didn't really understand that split. If you want to vote for Castle, I get it. I actually do. But I don't understand the big split between the two. No matter what, though, I was happy to see Risacher honored as a top 3 guy. He might finish first, second, third, somewhere in there. But obviously, being the number 1 overall pick, being a one-and-done age player, and to have that go so well that you are a consensus top 3 guy and rookie of the year, again, playing on a real team. And after a shooting slip early in the season, like he did a lot to bolster his rep in the league, I think, and had a very, very successful rookie season, to say the least. Now, the one snub was Trey Young. Now, I want to preface this. I don't think Clutch Player of the Year has a great history in general. It's the most recent NBA award. I don't really care about it very much, to be 100% truthful with you all listening or watching the podcast. But I thought Trey probably should be a finalist based on what you would look at for Clutch Player of the Year. The graphic made the rounds a little bit in the last hour or so, but Trey finished in the top 3 of the NBA in points, assists, 3-pointers, free throws made, and game winners, all in the same season. Number 1 in assists, I believe, of all players in clutch situations. Now, there's always the definition of clutch. The league has it in the last 5 minutes of a 5-point game, but Trey also made, again, those direct game winners. It didn't count, but he, of course, tied the game on Friday with a one-on-one play to score and tie the game. The passing, the shooting, the scoring, all that stuff. Is he the most efficient guy in the clutch? No, but notably, no one is efficient in the clutch almost, because that's a really hard thing to do. So anyway, I'm not outraged, but I think if you went on just the body of work, Trey should be in the top 3. I think this might be one where he gets punished for not being on a great team this year. I know they were a competitive team. The 3 guys who were finalists were all on better teams. It was Edwards, Brunson, and Jokic, I believe, is the top 3. So again, I'm not outraged. I thought Trey should have been a finalist, but I don't think he probably cares that much either. Honestly, it's not one of those huge awards. But at least wanted to say that out loud. That was a little bit of a snub, and I think that Hawks fans were rightly upset, and I get it. But in the end, I won't cover that too much more after this, I will say. Now, the last bit of news before we turn it over to exit interviews, the rest of the podcast. This is actually looking ahead, but more of a reminder. The ties for the NBA draft order will be broken on Monday, the 21st at 3 p.m. Eastern. So I'm recording this Sunday night. It's going to be Monday coming up. This is not a huge deal, but it matters to the Hawks, who might have 2 picks in this draft. Number 1, it will determine whether the Kings pick will enter the lottery. Again, enter the lottery at 13th or at 14th. And that might not be a huge deal. The Hawks are 95-ish% to get the pick no matter what, but it might be 13, might be 14. That one spot does matter to some degree, and that's most of what you're doing here. The Hawks actually, it's a weird incentive structure. If you want the Hawks to get the pick more often, then 14th is where you want to start, because then they're 97% to get the pick. If you want to get greedy and have the 13th pick exactly, you want that and a little bit lower of a chance, 94, 95% chance. That's very broad, but anyway, that's going to happen. And by the way, just as a reminder, the final pick and final determination on the pick will not happen no matter what until the lottery runs in mid-May. So that's just a little bit of a procedural thing. The other one is the Lakers pick, which of course is coming no matter what. The Hawks own it. And it's actually a pretty big swing. They're in a 4-way tie. So the tiebreaker will be drawn on Monday, and the Hawks will have somewhere between the 22nd pick and the 25th pick, which isn't a huge, huge deal, but 3 spots is 3 spots. If you go from 22 to 25, that would cost you some draft capital to move up from 25 to 22 if you wanted to, for example. So you want to get lucky there and finish and have that pick be 22nd versus 25th. If it's 25th, is it the end of the world? No, but it'd be very helpful. And I won't do this too much more, but I think Hawks fans know how I feel about this, but the Lakers basically had the profile of a 500 team by the stats, and they really, really ran hot to get 50 wins this year. That's kind of frustrating for the Hawks. So maybe a little bit of luck swings back their way on Monday. But anyway, we'll touch on that when it happens. But keep an eye on that. 3 p.m. Eastern on Monday to break the ties and find out a little bit more about the Hawks and the draft, which is about 2 months away at this point in time. All right, the rest of the show, we'll be talking about exit interviews with some audio later on from Quinn Snyder, also from Landry Fields, the Hawks GM. All this coming up in just one moment. Today's show is brought to you by DoorDash. NBA fans, do you know what time it is? Playoff season means big performances and even bigger rewards. DoorDash is bringing the heat with a slam dunk deal for DashPass members during the 2025 NBA playoffs. It's called They Swoosh, You Score. Anytime a player has 50 points or more in a playoff game, if you remember at DashPass, you can score a 3-piece crispy tenders combo from Wingstop for free the very next day. Just place an order of $20 or more and use the code Wingstop50 at checkout. And that combo is yours, crispy, delicious, and totally free. Offer valid noon to midnight, the day after the game. Terms apply. If you ever looked at food delivery in the past and said there has to be a better way, you can check out DoorDash right now. With DashPass, you get $0 delivery fees and exclusive purchase like this one. Just imagine how much you could save over a whole season with DoorDash. Here's the play. Sign up for DashPass and to unlock this and more exclusive deals all season long. And when any player in the NBA has 50 points or more in a playoff game, if you remember DashPass, grab a free 3-piece crispy tenders combo from Wingstop the next day with $20 plus order and code Wingstop50. That's DashPass, your door to more savings, more flavor, and more ways to win. Terms apply. All right, so it's customary in NBA circles, if you don't know this, that soon after the final game of the year, there is an exit interview process. Now, players are not required to, but most guys end up talking. And then the coach usually talks and the lead executive. In this case, the Hawks, it's Landry Fields. Everybody that needed to talk for the Hawks talked, basically, on Monday. On Saturday. Logistically, I have to admit this to you. It's what it is. Because the season ended very fast. I had a commitment of a family event on Saturday morning, and I was being a good uncle on Saturday morning. So I was not in attendance for exit interviews. So if you listen to the audio, all of it, I'm not there. I want to shout out my colleagues, Lauren Williams, Caleb Johnson, Kevin Chenard, Jamila Johnson. The list goes on and on and on of people asking questions, and they were there. Shout out to them. Hawks PR shared the audio with me. I've heard it all the players, Quinn, Landry, etc., and some takeaways for you here. So I would say overall, the vibe was like pretty optimistic for a season-ending exit interview. Now, I've been to a lot of these, heard a lot of these. It can vary. If you're a lottery team, it's kind of like performa. Everyone knows it's going to happen for a long time. This year, my example would be the Sixers had a disaster season, right? They had their exit interviews the night of the final game. Like they played a game in the afternoon and then just had the media stay and do exit interviews because the season was over and they knew it for a long time, et cetera, et cetera. I've also covered some teams that were on playoff runs and that were excruciating losses at the end of the playoff process, and the mood was very, very sour the next day. This is in between those two things. The Hawks, of course, deep down, I'm sure nobody said this, but I think deep down they know they were not going to win the championship this year. Probably. They're competitive guys, but they probably knew that. But also they ended the way that they did not want it to end in the play. They wanted to make the playoffs. Everyone said that. There was disappointment overall because of that, but also pretty clear optimism about the direction of the team and the franchise and the organization, given the youth and the talent on the roster. Like, it's a young team. They all understand that. And I think it was appropriately kind of framed through that lens. I think it was a good balance of disappointment and upset and, frustration, all that stuff about falling short of the playoffs, etc., but not act like the sky was falling, basically. I'll just say this, like, NBA players and coaches, but especially players, are like maniac competitors. Like, you have to be to get to this level, unless you're just an absolute God-given freak, which, some of those guys are, but most players, 95% of players are really, really competitive, and they don't want to lose. And I think sometimes, just to make this clear, like, I'm analyzing things from the outside and thinking about things in like an analytical fashion and much differently than a player or a coach on the team is, because it's a different job, right? I can be objective and cold and calculated about a situation, whereas these guys are all pros and they think they can win any game. They're competitive. They have more confidence. They have to have that confidence any series, any game, any matchup. And it's notable to kind of remember that they are not happy about losing. Like, that's just reality, and nor should they be, obviously. And that makes sense. One of the other themes that I want to at least pass along, broadly speaking, was that there's a lot of disappointment about not having guys get experience in the playoffs. Like, you can say it's overweighted or overvalued, that it doesn't matter that much to have, for instance, Dyson or especially Zach get playoff level experience, but it matters. They all mentioned it. They all wanted that. Obviously, you want to advance as far as you can, but the youth was a talking point, I think reasonably so. A lot of this was mentioned during the last couple of months, but there was a Final Four team in Auburn, which I'm not taking a shot at Auburn, by the way, at the college level, a Final Four team, number 1 seed, that had an older average age than the starting lineup of the Hawks. One more time. the starting level of an NBA team, the Atlanta Hawks, for the last 2 months of the season was younger than Auburn's starting lineup. Now, that's just one way to frame it, but when Trey Young is the old guy in your lineup, which has happened a lot recently, Trey Young's 26. He's still very much in the middle of his prime of his career, and he's like the oldest guy that was playing big minutes at a lot of times. Obviously, Niang and LeVert are older, but as far as the starters, the core guys, Trey's the oldest, which is crazy. Anyway, that was the theme. As far as players are concerned, I'll get into a few of those later on. There wasn't like a ton of news made by players. So like, it's one of those things where I recommend listening to the audio. It was available for you. I can share it in different places, but that's kind of the broad thing there. I want to talk about Landry first. So Landry talks the least. Quinn Snyder talks a lot because he has to before games, after games, practices, etc. Landry talks like 3 or 4 times a year, mostly. Probably the headliner news thing, although it wasn't a terrible shock, was that he got a question about Quinn Snyder and a coaching change. And Landry hesitated 0 in shooting that down immediately. He said immediately, Quinn's done a terrific job, and he, quote, couldn't be more thrilled. There was no wiggle room whatsoever. I shared this on social media. It was out there. I think Caleb Johnson posted the video. I'm not surprised at all about this, to be very, very clear. I'm not surprised at all. But I know some Hawks fans were thinking he might get fired or might be in trouble. I never thought that. And part of that was because of what I've been saying for the last few months. Like, this is still a positive, overachieving season. And generally speaking, when you overachieve expectations, you don't fire your coach, particularly when the coach has 2 years left in his contract and is actually an experienced, respected voice in the NBA. Like, it would have been a weird optical look to fire Quinn. I get it. There's frustrations. I didn't love everything Quinn did this year. I also think he's a pretty good coach overall. So I know people were upset about that, but I basically heard him. I've never heard 0 about him being in any danger of being fired this season. And Landry did not hedge at all in that answer. I think it was in a Patreon chat. It might've been on a radio hit. I can't remember, but someone asked me recently if Quinn could leave. And I said, I didn't think he would, but if he did, again, if he did, I think it would be way more likely for Quinn to choose to leave, whether for another job or to step down or whatever, than it would have been for him to be fired. And this answer from Landry backs that up. Obviously, it's one answer. You want to overstate it. But generally speaking, when a season ends, if the coach has been fired pretty soon after, he's not getting fired. And between that, logistics, it's been 48 hours, and Landry's answer, I think Quinn is very safe unless he doesn't want to come back. Keep that in mind. And by the way, I'm not saying Quinn is Eric Spoelstra. He's not, I don't think. But I wouldn't fire Quinn either. I think it's the right choice to not fire him. If next year doesn't go well and you have higher expectations, then obviously he gets more in the hot seat. And again, I don't think Quinn's perfect. I didn't love everything that Quinn did this year. I also think Quinn does a pretty good job, and it's like, has installed some pretty good principles, and the way the Hawks played process-wise this year was pretty encouraging. So that's where I would be on Quinn. I did want to play one kind of lengthy clip for you from Landry. This is only part of an answer. It was a very, very long answer that Landry gave to a question from Laura Williams, the AJC, when she asked him about reflecting on the season. Basically, it was the first question of the availability the previous night. So I clipped like half of the answer that I thought was pretty interesting, and it focuses basically on the themes of the season organizationally. So here is Landry talking about all kinds of things, basically not an opening statement, but kind of a statement holistically on the season from the GM.
It makes me think about going into this season, the 2 themes that we were really focused on. It was development and it was to compete. And a lot of times it's really hard to do both. And you're telling players specifically, and a number of us, like, kind of sit in this tension, because teams typically are categorized as, well, are you developing and rebuilding, or are you out here trying to compete or contend? And for us, it was like, no, we're gonna do both. And I was super proud of the group this year. I think they far exceeded my expectations. Frankly, if you look at our starting 5 by the end of it, I think our average age was like 22.8 or something like that. And for a top overall draft pick to come into an environment where, you are trying to compete, this is not like a complete rebuild at all. Like, we're retooling and we're trying to continue to maximize. You're watching that occur. So I think he had a wildly successful first season. To be able to play, but also, like, when you show up, like, there is a level of competitiveness that we're really trying to go after every night. Thought that was a huge success for him. And you look at Dyson from a year ago to where he's at now. I mean, my gosh, and defensive player of the year, talks and Zach and Rookie of the Year talks, and you're seeing Onyeka take a big jump. I thought Trae and his value he brought to this group, like those guys don't develop to where they're at today without him. And so we're doing that with him as our lone returner, starting wise. Younger outpaced our wins this season compared to last year, and that's not the end all be all by any stretch, but I give this group a ton of credit. And I'm speaking specifically about players and our coaching staff. Like, they have done a fantastic job, and we haven't had 3 rotation players for a long time with Clint and Larry and Jalen. And we had guys that had high aspirations for the season, even in Kobe, that didn't get to really play that much, frankly. And we've had two-way guys on contracts with two-ways that have impacted this group. I think back to the Chicago game and what Daquan did in that role and what Keaton has done not only in that game but throughout the season. That's a huge testament to the development aspect while also trying to be competitive and leaving it all on the floor night in and night out. And at the end of the day, you let the chips fall where they may. But I think there's a number of markers for our group that I'm incredibly proud of, from our staff to our players to our coaches. They've done a hell of a job. They really have. So it doesn't stop, right? Like, I'm going to talk to you, and then we're going to get into the next thing here and focus on the draft and the combine that's coming up. We'll build out off-season plans for our guys and say, here's the next stage, the next iteration of us getting better and how we're going to level up. And I'm excited for that, and the guys are excited about that. So having met with every single player in exit interviews here, there's a lot of gratitude, obviously a lot of disappointment, because everyone went into that game last night thinking we were going to come out as a winner, and there were moments there where it looked a little bleak, and then it came back. Obviously landed how it did, but those guys are great, and they're all itching to get better after a little bit of rest.
All right, so you hear there from Landry. Obviously, a long answer. I get that. It covers a lot of ground, and there's some Landry speak in there. Landry does like to do the Hawks DNA thing and the collective and the culture. I get that, but that's a good encapsulation of what he said, both in this answer and overall, and the way the tone of the season was. Like that two-way path I talked about a lot this year, about trying to compete while also retooling, and not a full rebuild, not a tear down, but getting younger, trading for Dyson, getting younger, and not investing in veteran players necessarily. So anyway, good answer there. And a good kind of window in where the Hawks think. You heard some praise for Trae, but he praised Trae a lot in different answers as well. But he was very specifically upbeat about Trae in this, and a lot of his talks praise Zach and loves the infrastructure around Zach, which definitely helps him. Praise the humility of Risacher, and his lack of entitlement is a good thing. Basically, he did say coming into the year he expected Mo Gay to be in College Park a lot of the season, and he was. But also praised the success story and the way that he impacted the defense at the NBA level. Of course, talked about the draft a little bit. He noted the peculiar position of waiting to see where the Kings pick will be and if it even comes, but also getting prepped for that, and the big opportunity of maybe having 2 first-round picks, which definitely helps to add to the coffers. And then noted the trade deadline was kind of an eye to the future, which I talked about a lot then. Those deals were not necessarily about the present, but also they wanted to remain competitive, which they kind of managed to do. They got worse in the short term, I think, still, by trading the guys they traded, Hunter and Bogey, and getting what they got back, but not by that much. And they helped the depth because they got 3 guys for 2, and also they cleared the books for the future, which is basically what he's talked about. And then lastly, he got asked about flexibility this summer and what they're going to be able to do in free agency, trades, etc. He noted that a lot of guys are under contract, which is correct, but also expressed excitement with the optionality they have, and used the term, so did Quinn, by the way, as we'll get into later on, having more of a runway to kind of do what they want to do because of the books being in good shape and all those things. So that's a brief encapsulation. I know the answer was kind of long. I want to share one about Quinn in a second too. That's actually even longer, but it's definitely pretty much the entirety of the Quinn experience in some respects. We'll get into Quinn, the players, that answer, and more in just one moment. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NBA playoffs are here. It's rocking, it's rolling, and it's basketball all the time. FanDuel's giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. And right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you get $250 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins at FanDuel. They make betting so easy at FanDuel, whether it's picking your favorite teams or diving into all kinds of player props that are available. They have offerings across the sports betting space, from point spreads to totals, money lines, game props, futures, live betting, etc. From points to three-pointers, steals, assists, etc. And they have so many different ways to bet your favorite player props across the board. Plus, after the game tips off, you actually combine live prop bets together if you want to into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. And FanDuel also has every sport you want to across the board, any league you want to. You can think of, really. That's headlined by the NBA, of course. Plus, they have college sports, MLB, NHL, UFC, they have golf, tennis, soccer, and everything in between. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com. That is FanDuel.com right now to claim your $250 in bonus bets today. All right, before we get to Quinn, I wanted to kind of at least touch on the players a little bit. There wasn't too much news that was made by the players in this spot, kind of the usual summer look-aheads, frustration stuff. Trae thinks that it's basically okay to be upset with losses, and none of the guys are okay in his way about with losing. You want to hear that definitely from your star player, your leader, and they all want to win. He was still pretty upbeat about the city and basically, being able to win in Atlanta and all those things that you want to hear if you're a Hawks fan. He said that on Friday and on Saturday. So that was kind of repeated from Trae. No shying away from that whatsoever. Zaccharie Risacher talks about playing for France this summer in Eurobasket, kind of the European Championships, basically, of basketball. Not a guarantee that he'll actually get playing time for France because he is so young. And France was a silver medalist in the Olympics literally last summer. So they're a pretty stacked team. But both Zach and Quinn talked about his experience doing that, kind of as a learning activity and just getting on the court, being around the veterans in France. It's always a good thing. Knock on wood there. Jalen Johnson said it was the worst feeling in the world. That's his words, to not be able to go out and help the team because of the injury. But obviously he seems to be upbeat. And as a reminder, someone asked me this the other day, Jalen is on track for training camp. There's no worry that I've heard of about him not being able to start the season at full strength next year. So hopefully that is all working out, but he is ready to go already. Not physically, but he wants to get ready to go and be ready to rock when it comes to September. Everyone, and I mean everyone, talked up all the young guys when it comes to Risacher, Dyson, Okongwu, Mogay, even Kobe got a lot of praise, even though he wasn't playing this year. Lots of positivity there. And then the last thing, full circle here from earlier in the podcast, multiple guys, and I would say headlined by Larry Nance Jr., talked about Dyson for Defensive Player of the Year. And Nance gave a full-throated advocacy for Dyson as DPOY, including basically saying if Dyson doesn't win, they should just change the award to the Biggs Award. I think Larry's kind of right about that. I don't think Dyson's probably going to win, honestly, if I had to guess. But I thought it was a good answer from a veteran guy. And Larry was, of course, upbeat, being injured. Clint talked. Everyone talked that you would want to hear from. And no huge news, but that's kind of a short encapsulation of all of that as I try to fit this all in one podcast. Quinn Snyder opened actually by thanking the media, which I will not play for you because that's not important to anybody except for the media. But this is longer than most clips that I would play on the podcast. But I thought it was interesting and kind of a good encapsulation of Quinn overall. So I've expressed this year, Quinn's not the most forthcoming guy to the media, but it's not like he's just, ridiculous. Anyway, I thought it was a good, complete answer. And notably, it's something he obviously wanted to say because this is basically his opening statement. And it went on for 4 or 5 minutes. So I'll play that for you now, and I'll come back and wrap it all up in just a second.
Well, let me say this. I think at the outset of the year, for myself and my staff, is we were defining success for the upcoming season. This was my second full year, which is still, it's not your first year, but it's still relatively new. And with a lot of change, as our roster looked very different at the end of this year than it did in the summer. And the things that I was really and our staff was really focused on was one, the development. We've heard about that, and that's development is an investment, and when you make an investment, it pays dividends over time. And some of that development, you see the returns on it, quickly. Just like any index, there's going to be ups and downs, but that was a real priority. And seeing, let's just take Onyeka most recently, because I don't think maybe people saw him in the same light that they did, say, Zach or Dyson, because he'd been here. But that's been going on. And, so you appreciate that because the work that goes into that. And the second thing was to continue to really formulate an identity. And part of that identity is the development, but it's wanting to be, a work program where we take pride in putting in work. Because again, I think those are the foundational things that over time help you succeed. A group of players that functions at a high level, that functions collectively more than they do individually, have to have a level of unselfishness. And those sacrifices were something. So that identity is something that you try to demonstrate. And, when you play that way, it's usually a good barometer of kind of where you are. Playing takes sacrifice. It takes hard work. And that was another thing. A third thing was a style of play. And we talk a lot about an offensive style of play. But I think when you watch particularly the second half last night, you had a group of people that were defending collectively. And I think that's probably as important as anything. When you set out tactically what you're going to do, there's always some changes, but to have a group that has a style of play on both sides of the ball, whether that be offensively playing with pace, which I think fits our team, playing with the pass, having multiple actions. We have guys that are capable of generating good offense collectively, I think more effectively than we have, isolation situations, and we wanted to try to capitalize, on that. And, and then obviously the winning is always important, but to have a chance to win a certain way. And, I don't know, all the expectations are always there. The fact that we were able to win on the level that we did, winning 40 games, with some of the adversity, the injuries, whatever you have. But the first three things, I think, those are the things that over time, those are the things that build a program. And obviously, last night was a hard one, because I think the way that we played, I saw all those things kind of come together. And you want your team to be rewarded for that in an external way. And that wasn't the case. But I think that foundation, although sometimes it's less visible, is moving that direction. And just like our players and their growth, with some of these young guys in particular, I think I talked about a long runway. They have that, and that doesn't mean that you don't want quick progress. But I think there's a realism involved, and we're seeing those things happen on a real level. And for me, that success in different forms. For those of you that have watched this play all year, and we've talked about us all year, I think that probably makes a lot of sense to you.
All right, obviously that's a longer answer, like I warned you for at the beginning, but I thought it was actually just kind of covered the whole gamut from Quinn, honestly, from the reaction to the game on Friday, the loss, to the full season, to the way that they want to approach things. That was a good kind of window into everything. And obviously the head coach, again, talks the most, is the one that's building the culture day to day, even more than the GM. Obviously the GM and the front office picking the players. The head coach is kind of the face of it a lot of the time. So that was a good answer from Quinn. A couple more things that he said later on. He said it was the best coaching staff he's had in 20 years. And I didn't have to say that. Obviously, there's some coach speak in there, but it was kind of unprompted. He wanted to add that in. Thought it was notable to me. He emphasized the summer for player development, of course, not even just for the young guys, also for some guys coming back, like established veterans under contract. He talks about being kind of one of the more challenges that he's had as a head coach. Stressed that could be a good thing for growth, but also the combination of a young team with injuries and the roster changes and kind of the logistics of that, and trying to push it all in and still win games and weigh the two track. I mean, I'm sure you heard the parallels there between Quinn and Landry, but that two-track thing, I've said it since October, it was going to be kind of a challenge to try to win while also trying to develop and retool the roster. And it kind of did that, but it was also hard. He praised players, obviously Dyson and Zach, and he praised Onyeka a lot the last few weeks in particular because he was playing awesome. Trey Young, he was asked about the next step for Trey. He said he's already taken a lot of steps and basically praised him a lot for making other people better. both Quinn and Landry said about Trae, like they give him a lot of kudos for being the leader that he's been trying to be the last couple of years, taking the young guys under his wing. Risacher was name checked with that, and the kind of willingness to adapt and to grow, and Trae kind of buying into the plan, helping everybody else out was a huge theme. And then obviously like Risacher is of course number one overall pick and the guy we talk about a lot, but it's also worth noting Quinn said a line that I'll leave you with basically that was I thought jumped out to me, and it goes for the whole team, but also for a guy who is 19 now, just turned 20. And the quote was, quote, "Zach doesn't feel patient right now. He feels urgent, and that's great," end quote. Which basically like you want to be patient. It's a young team, but you also have competitive guys that want to win and win now. And you're kind of balancing that. I think it's, again, putting a bow on it. I'll try to say this too many times this summer, but that's a big reason why I think this is a definitely success for the Hawks. Not only because they outperform the projections, which does matter, while also losing Jalen for half a season, which does matter a lot as their second best player. And I still believe they would have won 3, 4, 5 more games with Jalen. That would have even looked even better and been firmly in the playoffs. But doing that while also, maintaining that edge and wanting to get better. And look, they got to get better in the summer, like both internally, but also externally. They have to add to the roster. I'll talk about that a lot the next couple of weeks and months. Like they're going to have to add to the roster. It's not a good enough roster to win 50 games next season. Maybe it is if somebody just blows up internally in a good way, but there's some work to be done. But in the meantime, I thought that was a good kind of picture of what they wanted to get across in next interviews. Both you heard from Landry and you heard from Quinn, but also the players, same thing. Like everyone was pretty upbeat given the circumstances. No one's throwing a party. No one's yucking it up. But it was a pretty like balanced thing with a few hours at least to get your mind away from a brutal loss that no one enjoyed. And being there that night, no one was happy Friday night, as it shouldn't be. It's a loss, and it was a loss that hurt in overtime and all that stuff. If you want to learn more about that, I talked about that game a lot Friday night. It's still in your podcast player of choice right now. But I'll wrap it up there for now. We will have more coming up this week. If you missed it, if you're new to the podcast, we do not go away at all in the summer. In fact, we keep it rolling 4 or 5 times a week, all the way through until like mid-July, and then probably down to like 3 times a week from mid-July until training camp. But it's never going away. We'll be here all summer long, so go ahead and subscribe. We'll have more this week, including some predictions revisited that I said earlier back in October that I got some right, some wrong, and everything in between. We'll have guests on the show, lots of draft stuff coming in the next 2 months, etc. So please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast anywhere you find your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. Follow the show on X/Twitter at Locked On Hawks. Follow me there at BT Rowland. Follow my non-podcast work at patreon.com/BT Rowland. All right, everybody. Happy Easter. Hopefully you enjoyed the holiday weekend, and we'll see you later on this week.